Life is a fascinating journey, isn't it? The things that end up shaping our collective reality, the things that we focus on as individuals that have meaning and significance to us. So it doesn't surprise me that you showed up. You see, I've been considering tools, old modalities that we've all been exposed to one way or another, and how they help shape us in this reality. I was imagining that we might have a bit of a conversation today about some of those tools and how you might be able to use the tools you currently have, not only with more accuracy, but with more ease in your life. Because I perceive on some level, we are all very powerful creators at different levels of remembering who we truly are. And I find life is just a bit more fun when we give ourselves permission, consent to access our gifts, our skills, our playfulness in effective ways so we can live a satisfying life. By the way, I'm Danielle Lynn. Talk to super rad people such as you. Hey there. And so let's dive in with a few thoughts. So, as I mentioned, I've talked with a lot of people who focus very intently on using modalities and achieving certain states with them. And consciously or unconsciously, they sometimes favor certain states and unfavor others. So in other words, if you wake up having a bad day and you think to yourself, oh, what did I do wrong? There's something I need to fix here, etc., then you may be attached to the vibrational outcome. So I'm going to offer you some perspectives that are going to help you ease into your current frame of life so that you're not putting so much energy towards having to be a certain way. I find it takes an enormous amount of energy to try and hold yourself into a certain shape. I find that rather than attempting to toggle yourself by force, when we create parameters for ourselves to exist in, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment, I find that we use far less energy to actually get to where we want to go. We have far less judgments about ourselves, and we can use our tools and modalities very effectively. So let's talk a little bit about effective use of tools. What do I mean by tools? This could be modalities such as meditation, such as breath work. I find tools are great. I've used a lot of them and studied a lot of them in my life. Sometimes we can find ourselves overly reliant on a tool. Sometimes we can find ourselves really attached to what we think a tool is meant to give us or connect us to. And that makes sense. Most of the time, if you're going to start doing something, it's because you expect a certain kind of outcome. However, I have found that the most effective ways to incorporate anything in our lives is to merge it as part of our day-to-day way of being. So for example, you want to exercise, you want to eat healthy, it makes sense to integrate it in a way in your life from here that's going to start making it a habitual pattern for you. So start taking walks, right? Every morning and every evening. Replace soda with water. The simple things you can start with that aren't a complete life overhaul, that allow you to almost ease in to a new pattern. And in a similar way, when you're starting with a tool, it can make sense. All right, I'm going to do a journal every day. I'm going to start with 5 minutes of meditation every day. The thing I have found is that sometimes we can become overly attached to the ideologies and tools. We may mistake our power for what we're getting out of the tool. When that happens, the opportunity that we have is to pause and evaluate our choices, just like anything else, just like any other habit or pattern we repeat. Things can be helpful for us for a period of time, and then suddenly it can be, oh, is this still what I require right now? Is this still something resonant for me? A lot of businesses do this. They have quarterly reviews, yearly reviews. Well, we can do that for our life as well. Some people do this in New Year, right? We remember to New Year. But I invite you to consider that you can do this on a quarterly basis. You could do a month-to-month check on yourself. Now, I understand some people might avoid this because they're like, well, I don't want to burden myself with that kind of evaluation when you might feel uncertain of how the result will be. What I'm going to propose to you is that if you approach these kinds of inquiries with curiosity, and instead of being upset that you may not be somewhere you thought you were going to be, you can play with the idea of creating a trajectory or an outcome for yourself, seeing where you land. And then if it's not meeting that place, you have data. Now you can have a conversation with yourself, a non-accusatory conversation about, all right, let's be curious. Why did part of me say I want to achieve this, and why did I ultimately not arrive there? Now, not from the place that you're beating yourself up, but from the place of understanding that if there's a part of you that wants this, and a part of you that either is unwilling, unable, or uninterested in meeting this, then you either have an opportunity to say, well, maybe this isn't the thing that I thought I wanted, or maybe that there's something else here for me to look at first before I arrive at this point, right? For example, some people want a certain business or a certain amount of money. They start to do it, and then suddenly they discover the relationship they have with money. And they discover, oh my gosh, I have feelings about this. Okay, great. So now you have an opportunity to update, to be curious about that understanding. And this is one of the places tools can help us. They can assist us in these processes and alchemizing these processes with ease. And as you alchemize, wherever you find yourself at, you give yourself new awarenesses that can then, if you choose to do an evaluation at that point, may update you to a new understanding of what you want. Because sometimes you move in goodwill towards something you think you want, you arrive at a juncture, you experience, explore, alchemize that juncture, and then if you reevaluate at that point, you might find yourself continuing on the path towards what you think you were arriving at, or you might realize that that path, this thing was there just to bring you to this point. So you could have this awareness, so you could expand somewhere else. This is why I usually encourage people to not get overly attached to the specific story of their expectations, because sometimes people will arrive at that point, have their breakthrough or their integration, whatever it is, and they go, okay, well, let's just keep going. And they're like, why don't I care about this anymore? Why does this feel like pushing? And I say to people, well, check. Do you really still want that the way you thought you did? No shame, no blame. You just may not care about it as much as you thought you did. Found. Ladybug. So good. Hello, friend. What does Ladybug mean to you? It showed up for all of us. Bell chiming. Showed up for all of us right now. So I'll share with you what it means for me, and I'd love to hear what it means for you. For me, Ladybug is a symbol of life. I like the fact that they're beetles, right? I think about in ancient Egypt, the symbol of the scarab was a very significant one, having to do with the cycles of life. This specific one is red, red like blood, red like the root chakra. Something very grounding, and yet it flies. I kind of see them as a bug ambassador between humans and some of the other natural world. They've also been known to represent good luck, good fortune. Let's talk a little bit about luck. See, I'm a big believer we're co-creating our reality. And luck could be seen as probability, right? What's probable? Good luck would be, wow, beyond all odds, this thing happened. But when you're playing in the field of vibration and being as you are, one could say anything auspicious is possible. And now we're no longer playing in the field of probability. It would be like having loaded dice in your favor. Is it luck? that you keep rolling the numbers that you want to roll? Or is it that your inner gravity can only reflect what actually is possible and probable for you, which in this case others may interpret as good luck or miracles? I'll share with you from my own life. I've lived a life in which one might say I've had a lot of good fortune. From another perspective, some might say, how is she still standing? We might be able to say that about you too, huh, friend? And in my life, I have found that good fortune in some levels was very natural to me. I started to notice where I not only expected good fortune, but it was simply normal. It was normal for things to just show up for me in time. And if they didn't show up for me in time, it didn't matter because I was like, well, that wasn't for me anyway. Living my life that way allows me a lot of space to focus on what actually matters. When we start to become aware that our vibrational state, our gratitude shapes our reality, one of the common things that happens is first we get really excited and we start going, oh yeah, all right, I'm going to focus so much on how grateful I am. I'm going to write in all my journals. You'll see, like I'll just be like blobbing with gratitude. Apparently we blob with gratitude. And that's great, right? But eventually we arrive at a point where there's less than gratitude. I'm just calling it less than gratitude. I think that's a pretty clear definition. And the thing about that is there can be a tendency at that point to go, oh no, what am I doing wrong? What I invite you to consider is you have your human self with your human preferences, and you got your expanded self that exists eternally, and that expanded self is not only connected to everything from the perspective of oneness, is everything. So on some level or another, all interconnected. Now, you as your human self aren't required to specifically fully love that right now. There's nothing wrong with you if you're not super into it. What I am offering to you is if you can at least be neutral and curious about it, then what you're doing is you're disengaging from creating excess energy around it. Maybe just start being both honoring of the feelings you have towards a concept, towards a state of being, towards something, and then also be curious what other way it could be. I'll tell you, from a practical level, applying this in my life, things that used to irritate me or upset me, I notice now that I am naturally gearing towards curiosity in those situations. So instead of immediately going to like, oh, this again, I might feel my feeling, I might be like, but then I go, well, I'm curious about it. Let's see what happens. I would say so far that approach has not only bolstered my relationships, but it has saved me a lot of time and energy that I may have used to have spent worrying and figuring and contemplating something and wondering how it could turn out. What I'm sharing with you is a way for you to let go of the idea that things have to be a certain way before everything is all good. When you do that, you have a lot more energy to actually be adaptable in this reality. And as such, solutions come to you much more easily. As such, you are in the flow state. Try that again. As such, you are in the flow state and you're not finding yourself struggling to reach a state. By allowing yourself to be where you are, you're going to naturally gravitate back towards your core center, okay? If you want the water to be still, you don't thrash around to try and find where the stillness is. It just creates more ripples. Same principle. You just chill. You're like, all right, I am where I am. This kind of feels sucky, but see what happens. We're not going to spend more energy attempting to fight what is in a cyclical reality such as ours. We don't endlessly grow without decline. What that means is, even if you are grateful all the time, there's going to be either a point where that kind of gratitude becomes normalized, So you start to feel a plateau. It's similar to when you first get in a hot tub and at first it feels really hot, but then you get in, you get used to it, and eventually it starts to feel normal to you. It starts to feel normal because you've adapted, your body's adapted, the water is mingling with you. And in a similar way with vibrational states, we start to normalize them. Now that's pretty cool. The thing is, if you're looking for your states to, let's say, make you feel a certain way, then when a higher state becomes normalized, you could fall into a tendency where you start wondering, well, what did I do wrong? Or I used to feel so alive and expansive, and now I just feel kind of day to day. Well, there are some days I wake up and I simply feel low. Now, there would have been a time in my life where I looked at that and I went like, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? Let me do all kinds of things to lift it up. But as I've continued to live my life, I've started to find that if it's not a frequent pattern for me to be low, if I simply wake up one day and I'm low, that's just a data point. That's just a day. That's just a moment in which I'm feeling a certain way. And I have found that I have so much more inner grace and freedom when I allow myself the dignity of my delightful days and the dignity of, let's call them garbage days, right? And I would simply offer that my vibrational state, from my own experience, has a wide range that it encompasses. I tend to stay in a fairly grounded range for myself, but there's a lot of room for variation within that scope. Now, because I'm anchored into my core being, it's kind of like the roots of the tree. My roots are pretty deep in there, so it gives the rest of me, like a tree, a lot of room to just sort of, if a big wind comes, it's not going to uproot me. But it may, I may sway a little. But see, that's what I'm built for. That's what we're all built for. We're built to be very adaptable creatures. If you're finding yourself consistently in a certain place and you're not able to see how to navigate out of it, it's an opportunity for you to befriend where you're at. See, I like to say, befriend your shadow, befriend your challenges, befriend the places that you may not anticipate would bring a lot of joy. I'm going to show you here a moment. Let's check this out. So I've brought us to this space. Okay. I brought us to this very seemingly, it's kind of like a darkish tree space with some water nearby, potentially some noise around. But this was the space that wanted to speak to us today. Some might consider this a lower vibrational space than some of the other places I've gone to. However, I find that there's a certain kind of peacefulness in the dark space here. It brings forward a certain kind of energy and contemplation forward. And I think that's pretty cool. I'm curious what you think in regards to that. We don't need to make life perfect first before we're allowed to have fun in it. Just start giving yourself permission to identify what genuinely matters to you so that you can augment the way you say yeses and nos out of a habitual pattern into one that's actually rooted in your core frequency, in the core of who you are. Once again, if that's something you want to explore, I do have resources for that in the lab, or you could watch some of the other videos or check it out. There's many, many pathways to explore these things. So tying this all back, tools, releasing expectations, vibrations, the thought that I'll invite us to play with today in closing, if you give yourself permission to just meet yourself in the moment where you're at, you'll often find you really do have access to everything you need. Wherever you're at, it has everything you need to connect to your next resonant moment. I imagine that if you feel inspired, you can leave a comment, share your experience with today's video. You can check out the description link. I have fun things from my perspective in there. And in all cases, I appreciate you, my friend. I appreciate our conversations. And I look forward to our next one together.